budget information. I'm going to talk about the federal budget, and then I'm going to ask Kimberly to come up and talk about the state early Head Start program because of issues with that program. The best way to describe this process is it's really not a process at all. Ideally, the appropriations go through the subcommittees, committees, budget resolution, and all that. But because of a lot of side issues, in David Bradley's information that he sent out yesterday, there is the possibility of automatic spending cuts in January. It's called the sequestration. It's part of the Budget Control Act from 2011. On January 1st or 2nd, 2013, $1.2 trillion in cuts gets put into effect, and it's split 50-50 between defense and non-defense spending. There's a lot of talk right now because the Senate says last year's Budget Control Act is their budget resolution. The House says no, it isn't, so they passed a different budget resolution. In the meantime, the House voted down the president's budget, which was submitted back in February. The Senate last week voted it down, and the vote was interesting. It was 99-0. So they took care of his budget and took it out. They also voted down some Republican alternatives. So you actually have a standoff, and in I'm not sure Mexican standoff
I was going to say.
Yes, Mexican standoff, because of the theme here. You've got one side saying, this is what we're going to do, the other side saying, this is what we're going to do. And by the way, if it affects people, we don't care. People don't matter. So that's part of the problem here, because we're, as an agency, we're running federal programs that are usually based on some appropriations year, October, September, July through June, April through March, whatever. And it's very difficult to figure out how this will come down at the end of the program year, September 30th. So part of the frustration is, okay, they're going to wait, and they're going to do all these things after the election. And in some cases now, some of the information says that it may be 2013 before any action is taken, because it will depend on the election, who gets to be president. If it's Obama re-elected, goes one way. If it's Romney elected, goes another way. If the Senate stays Democratic, goes one way. If the Senate goes Republican, another way. If the House stays Republican, one way. If the House is still Republican but not with the majority it has, there's another issue there. So what we're looking at is this, and this is about as simple as I can make it. September 30th, end of the federal fiscal year. Okay, end of the year when money appropriated for 2012 is there. And something has to happen on September 30th or before to continue the federal government funding for whatever period of the fiscal year 2013 they want to do. So what you're looking at is probably after the election, November 7th, November 8th, or something like that. Then the goal would be, depending on the election results, in a lame duck session, what do you do about not only the appropriations for 2013, but also about the sequester? Do you stop it? Do you delay it? Do you do something else? Bradley put a comment in his report. There has been a remarkable shift in Congress with sentiments favoring larger cuts to domestic discretionary and less defense cuts in any deal to overcome the sequester. And for people in the social service program field, that just raises all kinds of issues. And at some point, it's really boils down to what I would like to do versus what I probably can do. What I need to do as the director of the corporation is just let people know that this is what we face. It's not being talked about a lot because nobody knows what the effect of the cuts will be, and nobody knows. There's Bush tax cuts, there's unemployment benefits, there's the debt ceiling. It's like a giant soap opera with every single element rolled into one, and we're left here. We know programs are funded through September 30th. We have no idea, the state has no idea what will happen after September 30th. So what I'm going to start to do is just make information available to the public and just express concerns about what we think may happen, may not happen, and try to focus on the people. In other words, what I think one of my responsibilities is as the director is to let people know in the community, well, this is what we're facing, and it's extremely difficult to predict, but it's political in nature, because Bradley says in here that, and this is the hardest part, the Senate's out of session next week, the House comes in for 2 days, they're in session the first week of June. June 11th, the Senate's in session. June 18th, 25th weeks, they're in session. And then starting in July and August, they sort of go away and focus on re-elections or electing other people or electing a president. And it's like, where are the priorities here? They're just not in the right place. So that's what you're going to see, and hopefully by the June board meeting I'll have even more information. But we have got to advocate for the people that we serve. We've got to advocate for the programs that we are responsible for. And I don't want to put the board on the spot yet to try to say anything and do anything, because we're really at the fringe of what may or may not happen. We're starting to see the committees in the Senate, the House and the Senate start their work, because that's all they can do. The House has a lower funding level than the Senate budget resolution, which is really last year's budget act. And the first indication of this is weatherization. The House at 50, I think it's 54 million, and the Senate at 145, something like that. Which you'll see with other programs as you get into the Senate, that the House and the Senate will be far, far apart. And depending on what happens at the end of September, we don't know if there'll be cuts proposed to get into a continuing resolution or what. But I just want to let you know these are the elements that are floating around, and I'll do my best to keep the board informed and also the staff and the public as far as what we think needs to happen. But again, my focus is not on the political aspect of it. My focus is on the people aspect. And if we don't do that, we're not really doing our job. And it's really hard at this point to tell somebody, well, we still have a LIHEAP program on October 1st. I don't know. The state doesn't know. The last thing I want to say is that last year's community services block grant contract with the negotiations, which covered this year's funding, the feds, Health and Human Services, told the states to plan for a 50% cut in the community services block grant, because that's what the president's budget proposed. Okay, this year the question is, well, there are actually two questions. One is, what's going to happen, because the president's budget was defeated in both the House and the Senate, so how can you use that as a guide when nobody's going to look at it? The second question is more localized to the state. Last year, I signed a contract with the state on August 19th. A week later, the Human Development Corporation in St. Louis started their funding decline and had all kinds of issues. And about 2 weeks after that, the state came out with a revised contract. And in red, they indicated all the changes they wanted to make because of Human Development Corporation's issues and lack of oversight and loss of money. We fought it, we won. They had one issue left in there. So we asked in a meeting earlier this month about, is that going to happen again? Are we going to just get a contract and have to deal with it? So the state director said that they would send out a draft, but we don't want to be held accountable for something we had no control over in St. Louis. The Community Action Agency actually dissolved. The state is in the process of coming up with a new agency. We don't know if it'll be the agency that currently exists in St. Louis County, but that's a whole other scenario as to what kind of a contract document we have with the state and whether or not it really is beneficial to the agencies to try to fight it or just let it go. So hopefully we're going to deal with that as well. But those are the things that I wanted to talk about on the federal budget.